The band gave the world timeless music. But behind the scenes, the partnership between Robbie Robertson and Levon Helm quietly unraveled. What looked like brotherhood on stage turned into one of rock's most bitter divides. Before his death, Robbie finally broke his silence about Levon, addressing the accusations, the songwriting dispute, and the tension that followed them for decades. Why did their bond collapse? And what did Robbie reveal that took even longtime fans by surprise? Let's delve in. Their story began in the late 1950s and early 1960s, when five very different musicians found themselves moving in the same direction. Robbie Robertson, a young Canadian guitarist and songwriter, crossed paths with Levon Helm, a drummer and singer from Arkansas, along with Rick Danko, Richard Manuel, and Garth Hudson. Individually, they were talented. Together, they created something that would eventually reshape American roots music. Before they were known as the band, they performed as the Hawks. The group originally backed rockabilly singer Ronnie Hawkins, who was hugely popular in Toronto and Hamilton. Levon Helm joined in 1957 while still in high school and was playing full-time by the following year. Under Hawkins's strict leadership, the musicians sharpened their skills night after night on stage. Robertson would later admit that Hawkins trained them well, perhaps too well. By late 1963, they were ready to leave and pursue their own sound. For a short time, they performed as the Levon Helm Sextet, which included saxophonist Jerry Penfound. After Penfound's departure, the group became Levon and the Hawks. They even released a single in 1965 under the name The Canadian Squires. But their real turning point came later that year. Bob Dylan invited them to join his U.S. tour during his controversial shift from folk to electric rock. Helm and Robertson agreed, on one condition: Dylan had to hire the entire group. He did. Touring with Dylan exposed them to larger audiences and intense criticism from folk purists, but it also forged their identity. Over time, people simply began calling them the band, because they were always the band behind someone else. In 1967, the group relocated to Saugerties, New York, where they lived and recorded alongside Bob Dylan. In the basement of a rented house known as Big Pink, they made a series of informal recordings that would later become legendary. The following year, they released their debut album, Music from Big Pink. Though often simply associated with the band's name, the record marked a turning point in rock history. The album introduced a sound that felt both ancient and new, rooted in American folk, gospel, blues, and country, yet unlike anything dominating radio at the time. Songs such as The Weight, I Shall Be Released, and Chest Fever quickly became defining statements. The Weight, in particular, stood out for its vivid storytelling and spiritual undertones, following a traveler's encounters with mysterious characters in a small town. It captured the group's ability to blend myth, memory, and melody into something timeless. Robbie Robertson wrote much of the material, crafting lyrics that felt poetic and cinematic. Levon Helm brought a raw, earthy presence, his drumming steady and expressive, his southern voice adding emotional depth. Together, they shaped a sound that felt communal, rather than centered on any single star. In 1970, they released Stage Fright, an album that hinted at the pressures of sudden fame. Tracks like The Shape I'm In and the title song revealed vulnerability beneath the group's rustic image. The music carried a sharper emotional edge, reflecting internal tensions and personal struggles. Their 1971 album Cahoots, recorded at Bearsville Studios, received a more mixed response. Still, it featured memorable moments, including a cover of Dylan's When I Paint My Masterpiece, recorded after Dylan visited during the sessions. Another standout was Life is a Carnival, energized by horn arrangements from Alan Toussaint, a song that would remain in their live set until their final concert, immortalized in The Last Waltz. Even amid uneven reviews, their live performances remained powerful. The 1972 double album Rock of Ages, recorded at New York's Academy of Music, captured the band at full strength. After their celebrated run of shows in the early 1970s, the band stepped away from the road for a time. They resurfaced on July 28, 1973, at the massive Summer Jam at Watkins Glen, sharing the stage with the Allman Brothers Band and the Grateful Dead. The festival drew an estimated 600,000 people, setting a record for attendance and reaffirming the band's place among the era's most respected acts. Later that year, in October 1973, they released Moondog Matinee, a collection of cover songs paying tribute to the rock and R&B tracks that had shaped their early musical tastes. It was a nostalgic project rooted in the sounds of the 1950s and early 1960s. Their final chapter as a touring group came in 1976 with The Last Waltz, a farewell concert that would become one of rock's most iconic events. The performance was filmed by director Martin Scorsese, who brought a cinematic lens to the night. The stage was filled with guest appearances from artists such as Eric Clapton, Neil Young, and Joni Mitchell. Released as a film in 1978, The Last Waltz cemented their legacy as one of the most influential bands of their generation. But behind the grandeur, tensions had been building. Fame, creative pressures, and personal struggles strained the relationships within the group. Robbie Robertson, as the primary songwriter, wanted to evolve and move into new artistic territory. Levon Helm felt increasingly sidelined, frustrated that the direction of the band seemed to drift away from its roots. When Robertson chose to leave after the farewell concert, the split cut deep. Helm saw it not as a strategic decision, but as a personal abandonment. To him, it felt as though Robertson had walked away, leaving the others to manage the consequences. In the years that followed, that sense of betrayal lingered, and the brotherhood that once defined the band was never quite the same. The tension between Robbie Robertson and Levon Helm deepened in 1993 when Helm released his memoir, This Wheel's on Fire. In the book, Helm openly criticized Robertson's role within the band, particularly when it came to songwriting credits and money. He argued that Robertson had benefited disproportionately from the group's success and suggested that the financial structure had not been fair to the other members. The memoir reignited long-simmering resentments and turned private frustrations into a very public feud. Robertson was deeply affected by the book. He felt that Helm's version of events distorted their shared history and overlooked the closeness they once had. In later interviews, Robertson spoke about Helm not as a rival, but as someone who had once been like family. He described their bond as the closest thing he had ever experienced to having a brother, a relationship that went far beyond music. He often reflected on how essential that friendship had been to the band's creative chemistry. Their personal connection, he believed, was at the heart of the music they created together. Looking back, Robertson preferred to remember the sense of unity that fueled their early years rather than the bitterness that followed. At the same time, he acknowledged that Helm faced serious hardships after the band dissolved. Health problems and financial struggles weighed heavily on Helm, and Robertson understood how those pressures could lead to anger. He admitted that if their positions had been reversed, he might have felt bitterness too. What troubled Robertson most was how suddenly everything changed. For years, he insisted, they had never exchanged harsh words. The shift from brotherhood to estrangement felt abrupt and painful. In reflecting on it all, Robertson chose not to dwell on resentment. He expressed sadness over Helm's struggles, but also recognized that he could not rewrite the past. For him, the journey they shared and the music that came from it remained the lasting truth. When Robbie Robertson was on his way to take part in a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ceremony, he received news that stopped him cold. Levon Helm was gravely ill. After decades of tension, silence, and unresolved arguments, Robertson didn't hesitate. He changed course and went straight to New York. "It killed me to hear this," Robertson later said. I did the induction ceremony and then flew directly to New York and went to the hospital, and I saw him, and I spent an hour holding his hand. Then a day, or a couple of days later, he passed on. I was relieved that I was able to get there and just be there with him. Their relationship had long been strained, particularly over disputes about songwriting credits and money, after Robertson left the band following The Last Waltz. Helm, the unmistakable voice behind songs like The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, Rag Mama Rag, and The Weight, had publicly expressed deep resentment. But as Helm's battle with cancer neared its end, something shifted. We were never not friends, Robertson insisted. What happened after I wasn't with the band anymore? I did leave, after The Last Waltz. I knew it was time. It was survival time, and I had to go. He acknowledged that Helm felt abandoned. He was right in saying I walked away, but he went to a whole other place in this that was never true. It just kind of ate him up, and it became part of his personality. Despite the bitterness that lingered for years, Helm later found renewed success with his solo albums, winning 3 consecutive Grammys beginning with 2007's Dirt Farmer. When he died in 2012, only Robertson and Garth Hudson remained from the original lineup. Richard Manuel and Rick Danko had passed years earlier. Looking back, Robertson admitted the loss still hurt. He was my best friend in the world, he said quietly, and so it did hurt my feelings. But I knew what wasn't true. Robbie Robertson often spoke about how his early life shaped both his ambition and his sense of identity. His childhood, he admitted, was not simple. His parents' marriage was strained, and the man he grew up calling his father, Jim Robertson, was distant and not particularly nurturing. There was tension in the house, and young Robbie felt it. The real turning point came when his mother sat him down for a conversation he never expected. "Sit down. I need to tell you something. Maybe I should have told you this before, but he's not your real father," she told him. Jim, she explained, was not his biological parent. His real father was Alexander Klagerman, a Jewish gambler with ties to the underworld, who had been killed before Robbie was born. The revelation stunned him. Suddenly, the foundation of his family story shifted. His mother later introduced him to members of the Klagerman family, including Nat and Maury Klagerman. They welcomed him warmly, embracing him as their own. Through them, Robertson began to understand a side of his heritage he had never known. Their confidence and boldness resonated with him. In hindsight, he felt that some of the drive he carried might have come from that hidden lineage. When he told the Klagermans about his musical ambitions, their reaction stayed with him. "When I told the Klagermans I had musical ambitions, they were like, 'Rock and roll? You don't want to be in furs and diamonds? You want to be in there?'" he recalled with a smile. Even if they didn't fully grasp the world he wanted to enter, they respected his determination. At the same time, Robertson's upbringing was deeply influenced by his mother's Mohawk heritage at Six Nations of the Grand River near Toronto. Music, storytelling, and community were woven into daily life there. The rhythms, the narratives, the sense of belonging, all of it quietly shaped the artist he would become. Looking back, Robertson saw his childhood not as fractured, but layered. The secrets, the cultural roots, the unexpected family connections, they all fed into the storyteller he later became. Storytelling shaped Robbie Robertson long before fame did. Growing up, he listened closely as elders in his family spoke, their voices measured, dramatic, almost spellbinding. The way they told stories stayed with him. "I said to my mom, 'When I grow up, I hope I can tell stories like that,'" he once remembered. And like many mothers do, she reassured him, "Oh, I'm sure you will." Those early moments planted something in him. Music for Robertson was never just about melody. It was another form of storytelling, part of a tradition he deeply admired. Even late in life, that instinct to create never faded. In his final years, he worked on a record he described as unlike anything he had done before. "I know it sounds good because we worked so hard," he said, proud of the effort behind it. He and his collaborators experimented freely, reshaping arrangements and using instruments in unexpected ways. "We took a lot of liberty with the music, too, the way the instruments are used," he explained. The project felt fresh, almost like starting over. He also carried lighter memories. During a photo shoot with famed photographer Richard Avedon, a powerful flash temporarily blinded everyone on set. Instead of stopping, Avedon leaned in. "Whoa, wait a minute, I want to take a picture of that," Robertson recalled. The result was an unforgettable, slightly chaotic image that captured the humor of the moment. Robertson's personal life saw its own chapters. He married Canadian journalist Dominique Bourgeois in 1968, and they had 3 children together before divorcing in 2003. In 2023, he married restaurateur Janet Zuccarini after several years together, beginning a new phase late in life. He remained connected to social causes, supporting organizations like Artists Against Racism. On August 9th, 2023, Robertson died in Los Angeles at 80 after battling prostate cancer. Surrounded by family, his life closed quietly. In honoring him, loved ones requested donations to 6 nations of the Grand River, a nod to the roots that helped shape the storyteller he became. Could Robbie Robertson and Levon Helm have truly repaired their bond if time had allowed? It's a question that still lingers for many fans who followed their journey from brotherhood to bitterness and, finally, to a fragile reconciliation. What do you think? Was a full patch-up possible? Or were some wounds simply too deep? Share your thoughts in the comments below and be sure to subscribe for more stories like this. See you in the next video.